Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're so glad you could join us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the story we have in front of us today is it's one of the most baffling, unresolved mysteries we've ever come across.
Oh, without a doubt.
I want you to picture something for a moment. Think about today. You know, if you order a $10 food delivery, you pull out your phone, and you can literally watch a little digital car track its exact GPS coordinates right to your front door.
Right.
We're just completely used to knowing exactly where everything is all the time. Now, I want you to imagine a massive, commercial-flying military aircraft loaded with 107 people taking off into a perfectly clear sky. It flies out over the Pacific Ocean, and then it just vanishes.
It just drops off the map.
Exactly. It doesn't crash and leave this scattered debris field for the Coast Guard to find. It doesn't send out a frantic mayday call over the radio. Over 100 people simply disappear into thin air. They don't leave a single solitary trace behind. I mean, not a life jacket, not a twisted piece of metal, not even a drop of oil on the water.
Well, it genuinely sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie. But this is a very real, incredibly well-documented historical event.
Yeah.
And to really understand how a massive aircraft could possibly slip off the map like this, we need to set the scene. We have to look at the geopolitical tension of the era. The year is 1962. We are at the very dawn of a civil war brewing in Vietnam.
Right.
And the historical backdrop we are looking at paints this as a classic proxy war of the Cold War era. So on one side, you had the United States actively backing South Vietnam, and on the other side, you had the Soviet Union utilizing North Vietnam as their front to fight this ideological war.
And I want to pause here really quickly and make a crucial note for you listening.
Right.
We are simply relaying the historical framing exactly as it is laid out in the historical record today.
Yes, very important point.
We aren't taking sides, and we absolutely are not endorsing the actions or the politics of either nation involved. We're just setting the stage for what happened in the sky.
Exactly. Our focus today is strictly on the mechanics of the mystery itself.
Right. So the subject of today's mission is Flying Tiger Line Flight 739. We're going to piece together the timeline, the bizarre mechanical clues that lead up to its disappearance, and the incredibly strange theories behind one of the greatest aviation enigmas of all time. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
If we're looking at a flight that just drops off the face of the Earth, the very first question is, who exactly was on this plane and where were they going?
Well, the passenger manifest is your very first indicator that this wasn't just, a standard commercial hopper taking folks on vacation.
Yeah, far from it.
The date is March 14th, 1962. Aboard this aircraft are exactly 107 people. Now, you have 11 crew members, which is relatively standard for a plane of this size. You have 3 Vietnamese soldiers. But crucially, making up the vast majority of the passenger list are 93 elite American soldiers.
And these weren't just random troops, right?
No, not at all. They weren't just newly enlisted guys being rotated into a base. These men were highly trained specialists. They were personally handpicked by U.S. President John F. Kennedy for a highly secret, classified mission to South Vietnam.
See, that detail alone completely changes the complexion of the flight, doesn't it? You have an incredibly high-value manifest flying into a very tense region.
Exactly.
What kind of aircraft were they flying in? Because, I mean, we're dealing with 1962 technology here.
Right. They were flying on a Lockheed Super Constellation. And for the aviation buffs out there, this is a legendary piece of machinery.
It's a classic.
It really is. It's this massive propeller-driven aircraft with 4 huge engines. And this specific plane wasn't fresh off the assembly line. It was 5 years old and an absolute workhorse. It had already logged over 17,000 flight hours.
Wow. Okay, so a very experienced aircraft carrying highly valuable personnel.
Yes. And the journey begins early. They take off at 5:45 in the morning from Travis Air Force Base in California.
But flying across the entire Pacific Ocean in a propeller plane, that isn't a straight shot. They couldn't just fly direct from California to Vietnam, could they?
Not a chance. The sheer distance meant the flight path had to be broken up into a series of island-hopping segments.
Right.
The pilots mapped out 4 specific refueling stops, first in Hawaii, then Wake Island, then Guam, and finally the Philippines, before eventually reaching their final destination of Saigon in South Vietnam.
Got it.
But the trouble for Flight 739 starts incredibly early on in the journey.
Right. It is definitely not a smooth ride from the jump. Even before they reach their very first stop in Hawaii, the pilots start experiencing ignition issues.
Yeah.
Now, It's not a catastrophic failure where engines are bursting into flames or anything, but it's enough of a mechanical headache that they know they need to get it looked at.
Right, you don't mess around with that over the ocean.
Exactly. So they land in Honolulu, the mechanics get to work, they supposedly fix the ignition issue, they refuel, and the plane takes off again heading for the second stop, which is Wake Island.
Yeah.
But before they even reach Wake Island, the exact same problem flares up again.
And this time we know exactly where the problem is centralized. The ignition issues are happening specifically in engines number 1 and 3.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. On a 4-engine aircraft like the Super Constellation, engines 1 and 2 are on the left wing and 3 and 4 are on the right. Having persistent ignition issues on multiple engines across the airframe creates a tremendously stressful situation in the cockpit.
I can imagine.
It creates drag, it messes with the symmetry of your thrust, and it forces the pilots to constantly monitor their dials instead of just, flying the plane.
Right.
So they land at the Wake Island airfield, and this time, it is not a quick tune-up. It takes the engineers several hours of intense maintenance work to resolve the problem. And notably, the pilots were highly vigilant here. They directly supervised the mechanics the entire time.
What does that tell you, though? The fact that the pilots were standing right there watching the mechanics work for hours.
What's fascinating here is that these repetitive engine issues are our very first glaring red flag.
Yeah.
When you are flying a massive, heavy aircraft over the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean, an engine problem isn't just a minor inconvenience like a flat tire on a highway. It is a matter of life and death.
Absolutely.
The fact that the same ignition problem occurred on 2 consecutive legs of the journey and required such intense supervised maintenance strongly suggests that this aircraft was already struggling mechanically before it even reached the halfway point of the Pacific.
It really paints a picture of a very tense, exhausted cockpit.
It really does.
But they finish the repairs at Wake Island, they take off again, and surprisingly, the next leg of the trip goes perfectly fine.
Yeah, a bit of a relief.
The pilots don't report a single mechanical fault. On the morning of March 15th at 11:15 a.m., Flight 739 lands very smoothly at Guam's Andersen Air Force Base. Now, I know Andersen is fully controlled by the United States military, so they're sitting in a highly secure location. They prep the plane for the next jump to the Philippines, and I saw that they loaded the aircraft with 9 hours worth of fuel. Based on the distance, does that give them enough of a safety buffer if things go wrong?
It's an interesting calculation. The distance from Guam to the Philippines is roughly 2,600 kilometers. In a super constellation, that translates to about an 8-hour flight under normal conditions.
Okay.
By loading 9 hours of fuel, they gave themselves a 1-hour buffer. In commercial aviation, having an extra hour is standard practice for holding patterns or minor weather diversions. So running out of gas midair under normal circumstances is absolutely not a concern at this point.
That makes sense.
They are fully fueled, the plane seems to be operating normally after the Wake Island repairs, and they are protected on a military base. Everything points to a routine continuation of the mission.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It's around 1:00 p.m., and the plane is preparing to take off from Guam. The pilot contacts air traffic control, but he makes a highly unusual request.
Yeah, this is bizarre.
He asks the Guam operators to manually relay their departure status all the way back to the Flying Tiger Line corporate headquarters in California. Now, they had not asked for this to be done at any prior point in the entire journey.
No, they hadn't.
On top of that, the pilot also requests an altitude bump. He asks for permission to climb from their planned 10,000 feet up to 18,000 feet. Why suddenly, halfway across the world, do you need your corporate headquarters to know the exact moment your wheels leave the ground? And why jump 8,000 feet into the air?
Both of those details are strange, especially in tandem. Let's look at the altitude first.
Okay.
A pilot usually requests a jump to 18,000 feet for one of 2 reasons. Either they are trying to climb above a nasty weather system, or they are trying to find thinner air to burn fuel more efficiently.
Which would make sense given the earlier issues.
Right. Given their previous engine troubles, the pilot might have been trying to ease the strain on the airframe, but the request to relay the departure to headquarters, that is highly unorthodox. It suggests the pilot was feeling uneasy. It's almost as if he wanted to leave a definitive paper trail of exactly when and where they entered the sky, just in case something happened.
That is incredibly eerie in hindsight. But at the time, air traffic control doesn't flag either of these requests as an emergency, right? The pilot doesn't declare a mechanical fault, so they grant the clearance and the flight takes off.
Correct.
And this is where we really have to remember we are in 1962.
Mm.
Shortly after takeoff, Guam explicitly warns the pilot that they are flying out of radar range.
Exactly. This is where the modern listener really has to shift their perspective.
Yeah, no GPS.
Right. Today, radar and satellite tracking cover almost the entire globe. In 1962, once you flew about 100 miles off the coast of an island, you effectively ceased to exist on the map. You were flying completely blind as far as ground tracking goes.
Terrifying.
The only way anyone knew you were still in the sky was through strict radio communication protocols. The pilot was required to check in periodically, manually key the microphone, and report their exact coordinates.
Which they do, initially. Yeah.
At 85 minutes post-takeoff, the pilot radios in. He sounds completely calm. He reports that they are exactly 280 nautical miles west of Guam. He confirms their estimated time of arrival at Clark Air Base in the Philippines will be 7:1 p.m. And he confirms they still have 8 hours and 12 minutes of fuel remaining.
It's totally textbook.
Everything is textbook. The next scheduled communication is set for 3:30 p.m. But when 3:30 p.m. rolls around, the radio is dead silent.
Yeah.
No check-in, no static, just nothing.
And if you put yourself in the shoes of the operator sitting in the tower, a missed check-in isn't immediately a cause to hit the panic button.
Because it happens, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Atmospheric interference over the Pacific happens all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, the operators themselves were experiencing some general communication difficulties that afternoon. So they wait.
Give it a few minutes.
9 minutes later, at roughly 3:39 p.m., the radio operator actively tries to hail Flight 739. Still, absolutely no response.
Right. At this point, the operators make a very logical assumption for the era. They assume it's simply a technical failure of the radio communication device on the plane itself.
Right, they just assume the plane is flying along beautifully, but the antenna is busted, and they just can't talk to them. So the air bases in Guam and the Philippines just settle in and wait for the plane to physically show up.
Basically, yeah.
Fast forward to 7:16 p.m. This is the exact minute Flight 739 is scheduled to touch down at Clark Air Base in the Philippines. The runway is cleared, the ground crews are ready. But the sky is empty.
Not a sound.
There is no sign of this massive aircraft. And that is the terrifying moment the realization starts to set in that something has gone horribly wrong.
The timeline accelerates very quickly from here. By 7:33 p.m., mere minutes after the missed arrival time, the military doesn't wait around. Search aircraft are immediately launched into the pitch-black night sky over the Pacific Ocean.
They just go straight into search mode.
Exactly. Their very first target is that last known location, the spot 280 nautical miles west of Guam, where the pilot made his final radio call 85 minutes into the flight. But searching the open ocean at night is a logistical nightmare.
And there's still a sliver of hope at this point, right? I mean, the military knows the plane had 9 hours of fuel on board.
Yes.
So they keep the search localized, hoping against hope that maybe the pilot had to divert and safely landed at some remote, unmonitored island airstrip, and they just haven't been able to communicate it yet.
That's the best case scenario.
Right. But eventually that 3-hour theoretical fuel limit expires. The fuel is mathematically gone. The plane hasn't landed anywhere. It is officially declared missing.
What unfolds over the next 8 days is staggering. It becomes the largest, most comprehensive search operation in the world at that time.
Unprecedented.
The U.S. military throws an unbelievable amount of resources at finding this aircraft. We are talking about 1,300 personnel, 48 different aircraft flying grid patterns, and 8 surface ships combing the water. They meticulously scour 500,000 square kilometers of the Pacific Ocean. Let that number sink in for you. 500,000 square kilometers.
To put that into perspective for you listening, searching an area that massive in the open ocean is like trying to find a specific individual grain of sand in the Mojave Desert, using only a matchbook for light.
That's a great analogy.
It is an impossibly vast area. And the result of that massive, unprecedented search, zero. Absolutely zero debris.
Nothing.
Not a floating seat cushion, not an uninflated life raft, not even a slick of aviation fuel shimmering on the water's surface. Nothing. By March 23rd, just over a week later, the search is called off, and all 107 people on board are officially declared dead or missing. It is as if the sky just opened up and swallowed them whole.
But the investigation didn't stop with the physical search of the water. While looking for answers, investigators uncovered a piece of eyewitness testimony that completely shatters the timeline and changes the narrative of what might have happened that afternoon.
Oh, this is the part of the investigation that is so incredibly eerie. So remember how the plane lost contact around 3:3 p.m.?
Yes.
Well, according to the official inquiry, around 4:0 p.m. on the day of the disappearance, which is roughly 90 minutes after the plane's last radio contact, there's a massive supertanker ship called the Lenzen sailing through the ocean.
Right.
The ship is located about 800 kilometers away from Guam. A watchman is standing on the deck of this supertanker, looking up into the dense sky, and he witnesses a massive midair explosion. He literally sees a fireball in the sky, followed by thick, billowing clouds of smoke.
It's hard to believe.
And then he reports seeing two distinct objects falling out of the sky and plummeting into the sea at different speeds.
You have a credible eyewitness to a catastrophic mid-air event at the exact time and in the general vicinity of where a massive airliner has just gone missing.
I can't ignore that.
No. The watchman immediately alerts the captain of the Lenzen. The captain realizes the gravity of what they've just seen and tries to radio Guam Air Base to report the explosion. But in a bizarre, almost unbelievable twist of fate, the ship itself is experiencing technical radio issues and cannot make contact with the base.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Yeah.
If a massive airplane carrying 107 people and a full load of fuel explodes in midair, wouldn't it look like a shower of confetti raining down?
Yeah, normally it would.
Why would the watchman specifically report seeing just two distinct objects? Wouldn't there be thousands of pieces of debris?
That is the exact paradox investigators struggled with, and it's a brilliant question. A mid-air explosion of an airliner usually scatters lightweight debris, aluminum, luggage, insulation. It's scattered over miles of ocean, which flutters down slowly. Heavier components, like the massive engines or the main fuselage, would fall faster. It is possible the watchman only saw the two largest, heaviest sections plummeting, while the smaller debris was obscured by the smoke or distance.
Okay, that makes some sense.
But because the captain couldn't radio the base, he takes matters into his own hands. He turns his massive supertanker around and sails directly to the exact coordinates in the ocean where they watched those two objects fall.
It takes them a few hours to reach the spot, and when they finally get there, looking over the rails into the water, they find absolutely nothing.
The ocean is completely barren. There is no airplane fuselage, no floating luggage, no bodies, and crucially, no oil slick.
The oil slick is the big one.
Exactly. When an aircraft carrying hundreds of gallons of aviation fuel impacts the water, it almost always leaves a highly visible, rainbow-colored oil slick on the surface.
Right.
The captain of the supertanker is so bewildered by the completely empty water that he assumes he must have just witnessed some sort of highly classified U.S. military missile exercise. Since he can't find anyone to rescue, the Lenzen resumes its course, sails onto Manila, and reports the sighting to the U.S. Air Base once they safely arrive in port.
And once the military finally gets this report, they send specialized search teams directly back to the exact coordinates the Lenzen provided. They thoroughly search that specific grid of the ocean. And again, zero evidence.
Nothing at all.
It is a phantom wreckage. The watchman saw it fall, the captain sailed to the spot, but the ocean kept it hidden. So what does this all mean?
It's the ultimate question.
How do we make sense of a plane that has persistent engine trouble, makes weird radio requests, drops off the radar, explodes in front of an eyewitness, but leaves no debris? Well, to make this puzzle even more complicated, there's a mind-bending piece of context regarding a sister ship.
Right, the statistical anomaly of Flight 7816.
Exactly. Just hours before Flight 739 departed from California, another flying Tiger Line aircraft, a sister ship, Flight 78 Twin, was flying en route to Okinawa, Japan. And on that exact same day, Flight 78 Styx caught fire mid-flight due to a sudden technical glitch and was forced to crash land, tragically killing one soldier. So you really have to ask yourself, is it just an incredibly tragic, highly improbable stroke of bad luck that two major accidents happened to the exact same airline on the exact same day, both involving military personnel? Or is there a coordinated conspiracy here?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the investigators certainly had to consider all angles, especially given the geopolitical climate of 1962.
Right.
Based on the evidence gathered, there are three primary theories that attempt to logically explain the fate of Flight 739.
Let's hear them.
Theory number one is sabotage. We know the flight experienced persistent, verified ignition issues in engines 1 and 3 early in the journey. This theory suggests that an operative intentionally tampered with the aircraft's engines or fuel lines before it ever left California, designing it so the mechanics would eventually fail catastrophically mid-flight over the deepest part of the ocean, resulting in an unrecoverable crash.
It certainly makes sense of the Wake Island repairs and the pilot's unease in Guam.
It does.
But then there's theory number two, which is an accidental explosion. This theory posits that there was a massive mid-air fuel leak. Now remember, they had just taken on 9 hours of highly combustible aviation fuel.
Plenty of fuel.
If that fuel leaked into the atmosphere around the plane, it could have been ignited by a strike of lightning or even just a buildup of static electricity in the clouds.
Yeah.
And there's a historical precedent for this. In 1959, TWA Flight 891 suffered a devastating tragedy under very similar circumstances due to a static-ignited vapor explosion.
And a vapor explosion is incredibly violent. It could potentially vaporize a significant portion of the lightweight airframe, which might partially explain the lack of surface debris.
Partially, sure.
But it would almost certainly still leave a fuel slick. Which brings investigators to theory number 3, a planted bomb.
Right.
The investigators noted a critical vulnerability in the timeline. After the aircraft was refueled in Guam, it sat unattended on the tarmac for roughly 15 minutes.
Just sitting there.
Now, Anderson Air Force Base is a highly secure United States military installation. Breaching that perimeter security would be incredibly difficult. However, the theory suggests that during those 15 entirely unattended minutes, an explosive device with a barometric or timed fuse could have been planted inside the wheel well or cargo hold, timed to detonate once the plane reached cruising altitude over the Pacific.
But no matter which of those 3 theories you lean toward, a slow mechanical sabotage, a sudden fuel leak explosion, or a timed bomb, they all end in a violent explosion and a crash into the sea.
They do.
And for the families of the 93 elite American soldiers on board, that conclusion just doesn't sit right. For them, the complete and total lack of physical debris points to an entirely different, much darker conclusion.
Yeah.
The families have long believed their loved ones didn't crash into the ocean at all. They believe the plane was somehow hijacked or diverted to a black site, and the soldiers were captured alive by enemy forces and subjected to interrogation or torture.
And from a psychological standpoint, you have to completely validate why the families feel that way. When an aircraft crashes, even if it is completely catastrophic, it leaves a physical signature.
It always leaves something.
It leaves a debris field, no matter how small. When military forces conduct the largest search operation in the world across 500,000 square kilometers and find absolutely nothing, you are denying the families the one tangible thing they need to process their grief: physical evidence.
Exactly.
Without a piece of the plane, without a definitive resting place, the families are left in a perpetual state of limbo, completely without closure. It is an agonizing position to be in.
It is absolutely heartbreaking. They are trapped in this mystery just as much as the investigators were, waiting for answers that never came.
This raises an important question, and it's the paradox at the very heart of this entire mystery. How can a midair explosion be massive enough to be witnessed by a watchman on a passing ship from miles away, yet leave absolutely zero trace in the water? How does an event so incredibly violent yield nothing for the largest search fleet in naval history to find? It defies the fundamental laws of physics and modern aviation investigation.
It really does. It is a puzzle with pieces that simply do not fit together, no matter how hard you try to force them. And as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown.
It's been a fascinating look into a real enigma.
But before you go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. Go back to that watchman standing on the deck of the supertanker Lenson. He saw the massive fireball, he saw the smoke, and then he specifically reported seeing 2 distinct objects plummeting into the sea at entirely different speeds.
2 objects.
2 objects. Think about that for a second. If a massive 107-passenger airliner explodes in midair, there wouldn't just be 2 objects falling into the ocean. There would be thousands of pieces of metal, luggage, and debris raining down from the sky. So if those 2 objects falling at different speeds weren't pieces of a destroyed airplane, what exactly did that watchman see falling from the sky that afternoon?